And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. It's been a long time coming, but today is the day when people across the country head to the polls to cast their ballots in what remains a tight presidential race. As they do so, voting rights advocates are closely watching, monitoring confusion over whether they're required to show photo ID. In fact, many of the most stringent new voting restrictions at the state level have been blocked or weakened by courts, including a key swing state like Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, in the battleground state of Ohio, Republican Secretary of State John Husted has issued a new last-minute directive that would disqualify ballots not accompanied by a form accurately documenting the type of identification used. Republican Ohio Governor John Kasich was asked about whether this could lead to a greater number of provisional ballots, which could delay election results. This was his response Monday on CBS News.
A lot of people got ballots to vote early, and if you don't turn those in, and then you show up to vote, then that you become a provisional, ballot operator. And so it is possible, if it's very, very close, that, we won't know the results of this for a while. But, again, I'm just not a fortune teller. I can't predict that. The provisional ballots could be numerous, but, we'll see. We still have today, and then people can drop that absentee ballot into the ballot box on Election Day.
Over the weekend, Democrats called attention to other voting challenges by filing a lawsuit to force Florida's Republican Governor Rick Scott to extend early voting. Last year, Scott and the Republican state legislature reduced early voting times. Now voters are seeing waits of more than 6 hours at the polls. Still, the 2012 election is also expected to set a record for early voting. 30 million Americans have already cast their ballot through early voting across 34 states. To talk more about what's happening at the polls, what voters can expect, and who they can call if they encounter problems, we're joined by two guests. Myrna Perez is senior counsel in the Democracy Program at the Brennan Center for Justice at New York University School of Law, part of the Election Protection Coalition's voter support hotline at 866-OUR-VOTE. In the battleground state of Virginia, we're joined via Democracy Now! Video stream by Brentin Mock, lead reporter for Voting Rights Watch 2012, a collaboration between The Nation magazine and colorlines.com. His latest article is called Tea Party Group Blocks Florida Voters, Stops Water Handouts at Polls. Welcome both to Democracy Now! Explain the title of your piece, Brentin.
Sure. If it sounds a little ridiculous, that's because it is. Let's take the second part of it, where poll watchers are basically trying to stop water from being handed out. You just talked about the really long lines throughout Florida, whether we're talking about Miami or Tampa. I was just in Tampa, and the lines were literally out stretching around blocks in many of the black neighborhoods. And so what you have are Republican poll watchers who were standing by looking for, I guess, voter fraud activity or something of that sort. When you had election protection volunteers going to hand out water to the people who were standing in lines, Republican poll watchers intervened, said this was illegal, said that the NAACP and SEIU volunteers were bribing black voters with water to vote for Obama, with the flimsiest of evidence. In fact, no evidence was even offered of this. Basically, you just had volunteers who were trying to hand out water to people who were standing in really long lines.
Now, explain the lines.
Well, there's early voting going on right now in Florida, and at least in Tampa, there have been 15 different polling places where you can go to early vote from last Saturday running all the way into this past current Saturday. And so about 3 of those polling sites are predominantly African-American, are in predominantly African-American neighborhoods. And, starting with the Sunday previous, where there was a Souls to the Polls campaign, you had churches sending dozens of buses and vans full of people out to these locations to have people vote. And, as a result, the lines have been, backed up, for going, stretching back blocks. And it's been really hot in Florida. And you have a lot of elderly people, a lot of disabled people in these lines. Unfortunately, to the credit of the advocates and the volunteers, they have been out densely trying to do whatever they can to help accommodate the voters, not to bribe them into voting for anyone, but just making sure that, they have water, that some of them have chairs to sit down in if the line is too long. I spoke with people who had been in line as long as 5, 6, 7 hours.
True the Vote, who is funding it?
I think people are still trying to connect the dots on, where the major funding is coming from. We know in Florida specifically, True the Vote has had has held a number of meetings and trainings with Americans for Prosperity. We know that Americans for Prosperity is founded and majorly funded by the Koch brothers. We haven't been able to connect direct dots between the Koch brothers and True the Vote, but we do know that True the Vote has collected money from the Bradley Foundation in Wisconsin. That was the group that was responsible for putting up the voter intimidation billboards in Wisconsin and Ohio. We know that they have, collected money from a lot of Tea Party groups throughout, not just Texas, where they're, where they were born out of, but also from a number of different other Tea Party groups around the country. So the money is coming in from a lot of places. We haven't been able to, find the grand puppeteer yet, though.
Mm. And do people identify themselves as True the Vote at the polls?
No, there's a really tricky thing going on right now. I mean, True the Vote itself, as an organization, is born out of the King Street Patriots Tea Party group in Houston, Texas. But they have these affiliates all throughout the country. So in Florida, you have Tampa Vote Fair, which is not, it's a True the Vote trained volunteer group. And then here in Virginia, where I'm at right now, you have the Virginia Voters Alliance. Again, trained by True the Vote. But we also have learned from the head of the Virginia Voters Alliance himself that True the Vote instructed them not to use True the Vote's name because of all of the lawsuits that True the Vote was having in Texas right now. So they basically said, don't use our name, not in your title or anything, so that we can have some kind of safe distance between each other. But I also think, based off of certain lawsuits that exist right now, that True the Vote might be telling these Tea Party groups not to use their name. So mainly because if any of these groups they have trained go out and they do intimidation, or if they do engage in anything that's unlawful, that True the Vote can kind of wipe their hands of it and say, hey, that's not one of our groups. You don't see our name on there anywhere. So, and I'm not pulling that out of my head. I mean, there's some actual legal lawsuits that True the Vote is involved in Ohio and also in Wisconsin, where they have literally said in their legal complaints that they have no ties to these groups, and they're not responsible or liable for what these groups do when they go out to the polls, even though these groups have been trained by True the Vote. Now,
an affiliated group with True the Vote, you write about, has challenged 75 people in Tampa. An official challenge where the person has to sign, under oath that they know the person is not eligible to vote.
Right. And I've been making this point a lot. A lot of reporters who have picked up on True the Vote over the past few months, they, understandably and rightfully have reported on what they suspect True the Vote will do at the polls, based off of what True the Vote has said that they would do at the polls. But that's really not the most dangerous part. The most dangerous part is what True the Vote does before people even get to the polls. And through that, it's the filing of challenges. And in states like Florida, you can file, a citizen or a poll watcher can file a legal challenge at the county elections office, which is what happened in Hillsborough County, where Tampa is the seat. And so Kimberly Kelly, who's the head of Tampa Vote Fair, a True the Vote trained group, filed 77 challenges against people in the Hillsborough County area, over half of those in Tampa. And these people, when their voting status is challenged, they don't know this. they won't know this until they show up at the polls and, you know, the person tells them, you know, your vote has been challenged. And at that point, that person will not be able to file a regular ballot. They will have no choice but to file a provisional ballot. And this is completely unfair to a voter to not know that their vote has been challenged. You know, and you can understand the kind of frustration and confusion that this is going to cause. You know, if someone waits 5-6 hours in line, finally gets their right to vote, gets up to the front of the line, and then you're told, well, actually, you can't go to the booth. You have to file this provisional ballot because some person that you don't know has challenged you.